Mrs. Clinton was the Secretary of State for 4 years under President Obama, and she has a record, and it's a record that she'll have to defend.
As one political dynasty reignites its presidential ambitions, another appears ready to do the same thing tomorrow. Jeb Bush is ready to unveil his logo. Actually, he unveiled his logo on Twitter just a couple of minutes ago. Now, it does not include his last name. It is also similar to the logo that Jeb has used before back in 1998 and 2002 in his campaigns for governor of Florida. You see the first name with the exclamation point. This comes only 24 hours before Jeb is scheduled to give a speech in Miami, where it's expected he will announce his candidacy for president of the United States. But the headline in the New York Times this morning tells the story of his campaign so far. Headline there, Jeb Bush working to recover from a shaky start. From that article, quote, Bush finds himself in a position he could not have imagined, part of a pack of candidates and the target of his questions about his own competence and conservatism. Jeb Bush wrapping up a 5-day trip to Europe this weekend in which he had hoped to bolster his foreign policy credentials before the general campaign begins. His strategists working to separate him from the field and one of his primary opponents, who they think could be hurt most by a lack of foreign policy experience. That is Scott Walker, the governor of Wisconsin. Bush aides telling BuzzFeed News, quote, that Walker was the 2016 contender who best illustrated the disparity they are hoping to highlight with Jeb's trip overseas. Jeb Bush holding a press conference at nearly every stop of his tour, in contrast with the no-media trip to Israel that Scott Walker took last month. Bush had once hoped that a shock and awe-style campaign rollout would catapult him to the 2016 Republican nomination and clear the field, but that hasn't happened, at least not so far. So in a crowded Republican field, can Jeb Bush pick up momentum once again? Let's talk that over with the field, but let's start on this logo. This is the breaking news this morning. We got the Jeb Bush official logo. We put it up on the screen, and what I notice is I've seen this construction before, this first name and the exclamation point, or name and exclamation point. There's Jeb in 2016. Looks like that's going to be the logo, but you can also look back and see Paul Wellstone. Do we have this? I thought we had it. Well, we had Paul Wellstone. I'll tell you about it. Ah, there it is. Paul Wellstone, the late senator from Minnesota, had briefly explored running for president. He would use that in all of his campaigns. His last name with the exclamation mark. Lamar Alexander running in 1996 on the Republican side. He had that. We couldn't find it. I'm almost sure, prove me wrong, but I'm almost sure Hillary Clinton in 2000 running for the Senate had Hillary exclamation point. So seen this one before. But anyway, Jeb's done it before too as well. But so the Jeb Bush candidacy. I know obviously you have some loyalties here to another potential Republican candidate, but John Kasich has been out there saying this. Other Republicans have been out there saying this, that what Jeb Bush was supposed to do, was expected to do, he hasn't done.
Well, I think it's ironic that Kasich says that, because Kasich ran against his brother in 2000 and got sucked out of, all the oxygen got sucked out of that campaign. The real critical factor is how much money Jeb raises in the first quarter, because that'll tell you how viable his super PAC is and his candidacy is. They're downplaying it right now, and I remember this from 2000 because, like I said, I was on Dan Quayle's campaign, and we thought they were going to raise $15 million, and they were downplaying that they were going to raise less than $20 million in that first critical quarter, and they came in at $37 million.
And that's when that meant something.
And right then it did mean something, and we went, oh my God, it's over. That's not going to happen here, but the viability of staying in the top 2 or 3 candidates will, and I think they're going to have a shock and awe number.
So, April, when you look at the rollout for the last 6 months, so Philip says that the number is still going to be there for Bush in terms of the money is still going to be there, but that intimidation factor he's talking about,
$100 million.
Not there. None. I mean, we're talking about a field of 19 candidates. Nobody's intimidated by this guy.
You know why they're not intimidated? Because we've been there, done that. We had daddy and we had brother, and so they're. I mean, I hate to say that, but they feel it's some of the same. But I will say that new logo is very attractive. I'm sure that it's hot. It's hot.
You like it?
They took a lot of time, because you're not just going to put out a logo. It's short, simple, and sweet, and that big red exclamation point. So I think they're calculated in how they try to embrace, but yet distance themselves from foreign policy of brother W, who many of the Republicans want to still run away from, but it's still he's still there. He was a president, and his dad was president. So I think what's going to happen is I think the intimidation factor will be tomorrow when he comes out, because I know it's going to be very big, and it's going to be, and we've seen all of these presidential candidates come out and make this big grandiose statement when they come out, like Obama started it, you know, when he was running, and we saw the first one, Ted Cruz, come out at Liberty University making everyone come. But, you know, this one, I believe people will be coming on their own, but he's going to make a statement tomorrow, and I can't wait to see. And I think the intimidation factor will be there.
And
Here's what John McCain said about Jeb Bush in today's New York Times. He said he just hasn't met the expectation level of what we expected of a Bush. That's John McCain. Of course, John McCain ran against George W. Bush back in 2000. But Blake, the case you hear from people from Bush people now is basically it's not we're going to intimidate everybody out of the race. It's more, this field is going to be exposed in a lot of ways. A guy like Scott Walker's lack of foreign policy experience is going to be exposed. Marco Rubio, there was this story about his finances. They think there's, you know, maybe there's going to be questions raised about Marco Rubio. And basically, months from now, people are going to look up, Republicans are going to look up, and they're going to look at Jeb Bush, and they're going to say, this is really the only responsible, mature choice we can make.
I feel like so much of the Jeb Bush rationale and candidacy is not about voters. It's not about these issues that he can connect with the voters about. It's this idea that he's going to have a ton of money. And that's something that is not entirely relevant to reaching out to voters, and it's also something that hasn't even been demonstrably proven yet, right? So I think that that's a shaky ground on which to have your candidacy, and I think this idea that he's going to have a huge number, he may, but they had a big shakeup, and you don't normally have a shakeup with your campaign staff if things are going great. Usually it means that there's something quietly behind the scenes that's been sort of disastrous. I mean, I've been on these campaigns before, I know. Usually the public doesn't quite know what's going on. Quietly, things are in disarray, so that's a bad sign. Something else I'd say, if you're going to look at Jeb Bush and what's gone wrong, I think there are two people to point to that are big parts of the story. It's George W. Bush and Marco Rubio. George W. Bush, I think that name, as my co-panelists are saying, is really shadowing him all over the place, Jeb. I think it's why he went to kind of Eastern Europe to show that he could be a commander-in-chief with a different foreign policy. You noticed when he went there, by the way, it was much more about his father than his brother. He was kind of talking about the Cold War and said, you know, and remember my father. And then the Marco Rubio thing, I think, is significant because a lot of us didn't think that they were both going to get in the race. Jeb Bush from Florida, Marco Rubio from Florida. Rubio is not just in, he's doing quite well. So I think that also spells a bit of a problem.
And, you know, and by the way, the other thing, you look at these polls now matching up the Republicans against Hillary Clinton, and Jeb Bush is running behind Hillary Clinton. He's not doing better than the other Republicans who are out there. In fact, he's doing worse than Rand Paul, Marco Rubio. A lot of these polls, they actually run better against Hillary right now than he does. So it's tough to sit there and make that electability argument, at least with those numbers. Anyway, still ahead, what to expect when you are expecting a Supreme Court decision, a major ruling on the Affordable Care Act that is due any day now. But next, as it stands right now, who will be in that first Republican debate and who will not? New numbers. We will show you that cut line, where it is right now. Stay with us.